Collected, created, and presented by Pawan Thakur from Thakur Property Consultancy, 900-435-2787. Post-independence Indian history is built upon the central pillar of Ganga Yamuni Tehzeeb, the idea of a deeply syncretic, composite culture where differing communities seamlessly blended together over centuries. Within this official framework, the 1947 partition is presented as an artificial anomaly. State curricula explicitly frame the two-nation theory as a political fiction invented by the British Empire's divide-and-rule policy to fracture a unified population. Analysis of the 1966 NCERT curriculum revisions reveals a deliberate hidden curriculum. These textbooks subordinated India's complex social realities to a forced narrative of secular unity. They characterized the Hindu-Muslim divide as a strictly colonial imposition, denying indigenous ideological roots for the fracture. However, the chronological timeline reveals a severe contradiction in this official history. If the two-nation theory was merely a 20th-century British tactic, the dates of its intellectual development do not align. The British political maneuvering cited in textbooks occurred in the late 19th and 20th centuries, yet the organized movements demanding Islamic separation emerged over 2 centuries prior to the partition. The two-nation theory was the product of a 200-year ideological evolution. It was a specific Middle Eastern coloniality, a theological drive for supremacy that eventually utilized European constitutional law to achieve political division. Clinging to the sanitized myth of a composite culture leaves modern scholars blind to the actual engine that drove the partition of India. In the early 1700s, the rapid collapse of Mughal political power created a sudden vacuum in the subcontinent. This disintegration triggered a profound theological panic among Islamic scholars. Without the protection of state power, they feared the community would be absorbed into the vast Hindu majority, ending Islamic supremacy. Shah Waliullah Dehlawî responded by initiating pan-Islamic movements. He sought to counter the decline of Muslim power by appealing to external forces and internal purification. Dehlawî's objective was the firm ejection of any cultural syncretism with the Hindu population. He believed survival depended on maintaining strict religious boundaries and restoring absolute Islamic state power. This Dehlawîte vision nurtured generations of ulema through seminaries like Deoband, establishing a deeply religious foundation for future political separation long before the British consolidated control. The bedrock of the two-nation theory was an explicit theological imperative to reclaim the supremacy lost with the Mughal collapse. After the 1857 rebellion, Muslim elites faced a new reality. Armed resistance was impossible, requiring a different strategy to engage with British colonial power. Syed Ahmed Khan modernized the theological stance of the Dehlawîte vision. He sought to protect Muslim interests by working within the new British administrative framework. His Aligarh movement combined traditional Islamic learning with Western education. The goal was to produce a new political elite capable of navigating the British system. Khan created an institutional environment at Aligarh that intentionally insulated Muslim youth from the broader composite nationalism developing across the rest of India. He translated religious distinctiveness into the modern European language of the nation-state. Khan argued that Hindus and Muslims were two entirely distinct nations, separate races with histories and religions that precluded shared political power. He warned that Western-style, one-man, one-vote democracy would relegate the former Muslim rulers to permanent subjugation under a Hindu numerical majority. Allama Iqbal, the spiritual father of Pakistan, expanded these theories by providing a philosophical and geographical framework for separation. Iqbal argued that because Muslims were a separate nation, they required a consolidated geographical state to successfully enforce Islamic Sharia. Maulana Maududi further weaponized his ideology, warning that integration into a united India meant replacing British masters with Hindu ones. He rejected the Indian National Congress's theme of one country. Muhammad Ali Jinnah became the ultimate political executor of this intellectual lineage. By 1940, Jinnah had transitioned from an early advocate of unity to the uncompromising leader of the separatist movement, leading the Muslim League to pass the Lahore Resolution. By the 20th century, the raw theological panic of the 1700s had been successfully repackaged into a highly sophisticated modern political nationalism. In 1909, the British government faced rising Indian nationalism alongside the heavily organized demands of Muslim separatists. The 1909 Minto-Morley reforms became the catastrophic legal turning point for the subcontinent. The British granted communal electorates, separate voting blocks specifically for Muslims. This mechanism physically divided the populace by religion. In a communal electorate, Muslims voted only for Muslim candidates, isolating them from the general pool. This legally validated the two-nation theory's core premise, irreconcilable identities, permanently embedding separatism into India's constitutional DNA. The moderate faction of the Indian National Congress failed to stop this entrenchment. INC leaders pursued a Western-style secular nationalism while ignoring the explicitly stated, religiously driven separatist reality of the Muslim leadership. The moderates misdiagnosed the problem by treating a deep, civilizational, expansionist consciousness as a mere political grievance, assuming it could be solved with British parliamentary compromises. At the turn of the century, the subcontinent existed as a sandwiched civilization, caught between colliding frameworks. Three distinct frameworks collided: indigenous Indic consciousness, European colonial law, and Middle Eastern coloniality. When Middle Eastern coloniality, the ideological engine, utilized the structural vehicle of European constitutional law, it created an unstoppable mechanism for partition. The 1946 elections provided the ultimate proof of this mechanism. The overwhelming majority of the Muslim electorate explicitly voted for the creation of Pakistan. The masses mobilized because the ideological groundwork had been laid relentlessly over 200 years. Not because of a sudden event in the 1940s. In 1947, when intellectual theory met physical geography, the resulting rupture tore the subcontinent apart. The sheer scale of displacement and death followed the drawing of the borders. Ideological theories exact a real human price. This reality stands in contrast to the comfortable, sanitized textbook narratives that followed independence. Viewing the two-nation theory through the lens of the composite culture narrative leaves policymakers unequipped to handle modern South Asian geopolitics. To understand history, we must boldly read what its architects actually wrote, rather than what we wish they had written.